Yeah, I know, the original source we're talking about goes over 2 players, but because Montreal is Montreal, and we can have several discussions about these things here, let's talk about one of the guys that is reported towards potentially being a player the Habs have, at the very least, made informative calls about. So, on Twitter the other day, we had ourselves a tweet made by Maxime Guerin. And if you don't know who this guy is, he happens to be a consultant to NHL Central Scouting. So somebody who does indeed work in the NHL sphere of being in the know, of having conversations with people about prospects and maybe news and maybe rumors or whatever. And he posted a tweet the other day that read this. It's actually in French, but if you translate it from French into English, it says, "According to the information I have learned this morning, the Montreal Canadiens have inquired about Vancouver Canucks forward JT Miller, as well as Philadelphia Flyers forward Jakub Voracek. They have been informative calls at the moment." He also says over here in a follow-up tweet, "Just to remind you that I am, as always, the messenger of the information that I receive. Everything is done with respect, even if you do not agree with the subject, and that I can discuss with you with pleasure." So there's our rumor right here. Montreal calling out for JT Miller of the Vancouver Canucks. Again, there's another name in there, Jakub Voracek, but that's a completely separate video for another day. I wanted to talk about Miller here, because when I saw this pop up on my timeline and I saw what people had to say about it, my very first instinct was, Marc Bergevin, man, please, you've already heard us enough. This is the kind of thing where it's like, wow, you get JT Miller on Montreal, you already know that the next time Montreal and Vancouver end up playing each other, you're going to have a Tyler Toffoli hat trick and a JT Miller Gordie Howe hat trick, where he gets 2 assists and a fight as well. He beats up on whoever it is the Vancouver Canucks have to replace this guy. The meme potential for this is just so incredibly high. If you talk about JT Miller getting sent over to the team that already gave a new home to one of the players that a lot of people are pretty much agreeing on over here, was Jim Benning's biggest mistake. But going back over to JT Miller and disregarding the Tyler Toffoli thing, because I know we've dug that topic into the ground already, going back to Miller, he is a guy who is in a pretty interesting position because, as we had noted over the past few months, there have been some rumblings going around the NHL that a guy like JT Miller might have been in the position to maybe wanting a change of scenery. It was quickly debunked when Elliot Friedman spoke to JT Miller himself, and Miller was like, yeah, I don't want to be traded, I'm good, I'm sticking around here, I'm fine. And so that rumor was shut down really quickly, but it does not mean that other NHL GMs are not allowed to go out there and maybe, just maybe, make some calls going around there. The source here, Guerin, says that it is a preliminary informative call. And that pretty much means that, it's not really something where the Canucks have Miller on the trade block and Montreal is making a proposal or anything. It's just they're calling just to get some information about the guy. Hey, Jim, what's going on? It's Marc Bergevin. How are you doing? Just calling to ask what's going on with this JT Miller guy. We heard some rumors earlier in the season. Is he up for grabs? Is he this? Is he that? Would you be interested in going out there with a trade with us because we like this guy? If you're going out there making an informative call to other NHL teams, at the very least, the baseline implication is that you like that player. It's not really a secret. You wouldn't go out there and make informative calls about players you don't want. And for JT Miller, it's like, okay, well, of course, a team like the Montreal Canadiens would want this guy because JT Miller is a point-producing two-way machine. Miller had 46 points in 53 games last season with the Vancouver Canucks on the pandemic-ridden, terrible schedule-ridden, overall just up and down, really not all too great Vancouver Canucks squad. Still was under a point per game there. Was indeed over a point per game, though, in his first season with the club. 72 points, 69 games played, 27 goals, 45 assists, and a point per game player in the bubble as well. JT Miller has been a legit force for the Vancouver Canucks, and he's making $5.25 million a season until 2022-2023 at 28 years old. Miller has himself an opportunity here to really establish himself in the next few seasons as one of the prime Vancouver Vancouver Canucks on this roster. Sure, you could say that Elias Pettersson is better skill-wise. Sure, you could say that Quinn Hughes is a better dangler. But Miller has been one of the most important cogs to this team the past few seasons that I could totally understand why Marc Bergevin of the Montreal Canadiens may be making a call to say, all right, this guy has been in Rumours, what's the situation? How's it going? If he is in a position of maybe wanting to be moved, would you like to send him over to Montreal? Because, of course, you wouldn't be doing your job as an NHL general manager if you weren't checking up with these players and all that. So this isn't really something that I think any Canucks fans should be worried about. It is just a conversation that you can be having because, okay, GMs, they talk, they go out there, they do their thing, they have to survey the market and see what's going on here. It's just funny that the apparent interest or the informative calls themselves have made their way over to NHL Central Scouting consultants who have started making Twitter posts about it and going over what is going on. Again, they're just posting what they're hearing, and if this guy works at NHL Central Scouting, I think he probably knows some people who may have some insider information. But, you know what I want to do a little bit more in this video is explore the idea of what it actually would take to do a JT Miller trade. Assume a trade actually does get made, and it's not because Miller is upset or whatever. Assume everything is just the same. Miller went out to Friedman, he said, no, I want to stay here in Vancouver. Let's say in his heart of hearts he really does want to stay in Vancouver. What does it take for Marc Bergevin to make a trade for JT Miller that Benning actually says yes to? Because I'm going to tell you right here, it's going to take quite a lot. The Vancouver Canucks made a really, really big bet on JT Miller when they traded for him back in the 2019 NHL Entry Draft because they sent away a first-round pick, Marek Mazanich, I believe, and some other stuff there too. And the first-round pick was a really big deal because back when the Canucks were doing this transaction, they were still a pretty bad team. So this was seen as the biggest push to finally put the team over the hump. And JT Miller, he came over to Vancouver and he showcased everything that we wanted him to and more. I still remember the conversations Canucks fans had about Miller when they acquired him. Oh, he was at 47 points in 75 games with the stacked Lightning squad. He was at a point per game when he arrived in Tampa Bay in 2017-2018, where the Lightning also went on a pretty deep run. JT Miller's the kind of guy that could probably net you maybe 20 goals and 50 points in a good year, full 82 games played season right there. He'll probably be in that range, but no, he shattered our expectations with an over point per game season. That is fantastic. It's been a very long time since the Vancouver Canucks have actually had a point per game season above 65 games played. The last time actually being Henrik and Daniel Sedin in 2010-2011. Go figure. But yeah, Miller has been fantastic, and so if you're going to go out there as Jim Benning and saying to Marc Bergevin, okay, if you really want this guy, it's going to take X, Y, Z. What is that X, Y, Z? Is it Cole Caulfield and a first? Is it a roster player today like maybe a Nick Suzuki and maybe something else? The Montreal Canadiens, in my opinion, don't really have too many players that I think you could compare to a JT Miller in terms of everything they do. Tyler Toffoli, while he does a lot, he's a slow guy, doesn't play with the pace that Miller does. Nick Suzuki, while he's fantastic, he's still a little bit younger, so it's not really all too guaranteed with Suzuki. I get that that's a bad argument. I know a lot of people are going to flame me for saying that, but still, Miller has already had a point-per-game season. Suzuki, he's working his way up to that. Caulfield, again, rookie in the NHL. You can't do that. Brendan Gallagher. Hey, this guy's great, but he didn't produce all too much in the playoffs. Miller did. Miller had a point-per-game playoff run last year in the bubble. Sure, you could say that's not really all too important when your team isn't making the playoffs or because, hey, your team went to the finals and you played a very important part of the system. It's still a piece of the puzzle that I think should be conversed about when talking about potential trades for one of the best players on the Vancouver Canucks. So, for those out there watching this video thinking about the idea of a Miller trade to Montreal, if you're a Habs fan, what is the most you would be willing to give up in a trade for Miller? If you're a Canucks fan, what is the minimum that the Habs would have to include in order for you to say yes? Because it would be easy to say, okay, give me Suzuki, Caulfield, 3 firsts, and Romanov, and maybe take on Louis Eriksson as well, because then you'll have yourselves a good deal. Obviously, that's not realistic. But if you're a fan on either side of these fan bases over here, then hey, Talk to me in the comments what you think about this entire idea over here. JT Miller to the Habs. Obviously, it's just informative calls right here. Nothing really set in stone, nor is there really any substance to these conversations in the slightest. It's just a pretty interesting idea I thought I would bring up because apparently it's kind of in that informative call stage, according to somebody who works for NHL Central Scouting. So talk to me in the comments if you enjoyed this video. And bye.